Hey, everybody, Patrick Verno here. Thanks for joining me on another episode of this LinkedIn Live. And on this episode, I wanted to talk about resilience, but also I wanted to talk about how to prevent being a victim, because I think that's an important part of this too when we're building resilience. And I'm going to mention a few different resources that I think are worth looking at. A couple different books, authors that I have found valuable and do a lot of work in this area. Then I really want to talk about what's called the drama triangle and how that plays into, I think, our ability or the trap that we can fall into in terms of being a victim of what's going on around us. Um, and then I want to talk about a GPS. And lastly, I want to talk about a model that I use that's in the first part of the book that I wrote called the Leadership Bridge, because I think it's an important part of how do we build the bridge with ourselves first. And this model that I talk about, power, it's about 5 activities that we all have the ability to do. So there's an action that we can take here to try and build our resilience, as well as identify how we can prevent ourselves from being a victim. So first, what are some of the authors I want to talk about? One is Angela Duckworth. I think her work on grit is great. Her book is certainly well worth the read, but you can find a number of short articles from her, TED Talks, things like that if you want. And I think it's worthwhile to dig into grit. How do you use grit? How gritty are you? Is important. The other is Carol Dweck, and her research is really important around a growth mindset and creating a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And I think when we're feeling as though we're overwhelmed, and I think when we're feeling as though we're a victim, we don't have any control over this. That's a fixed mindset. When we feel like, it's out of my control, I can't do this. This is just the way things are. Versus a growth mindset is more about looking at saying there are fixed resources. I might not be tall enough. I might not have the right education, enough money, whatever that lacking resource is. But a growth mindset to me is about resourcefulness. We all have equal access to resourcefulness. Nobody has any more or any less. It's people that learn how to tap into that are the ones that I believe build this strong sense of resilience. They're going to find a way around whatever the situation is to be able to deal with it. The next one I want to talk about is Nicholas Nassim Taleb. And he's written several incredible books. I think his most popular is probably The Black Swan. He wrote a great book that I recently read called Skin in the Game. But the one I want to talk about or just mention that I think is well worth the read is a book called Anti-Fragile. And that book talks about how if we think about different things around us, as strong as they might be, a vehicle or machinery, that those things are all fragile. As strong as they are, they eventually, as the more they're used, they wear down, right? A tractor is not going to survive forever. At some point, the wear and tear on it, it's fragile. Even though if it doesn't seem it in the beginning, in the bigger picture, it's fragile. Things that are anti-fragile are things that get stronger. The more they're stressed, the more strain that's put on them, they become stronger. And it's trying to create a mindset in ourselves of being anti-fragile, that all the things around us that might challenge us, that these are things that we can use to become stronger if we choose to approach it that way. So those are the 3 authors that I would talk about. The next thing that I want to mention is this thing called the drama triangle. And this was identified many, many years ago. The creator of this model was a psychiatrist. His name is Stephen Cartman. And in the drama triangle, you have a persecutor, you have what would be called a savior, a hero, or a rescuer, and then we have the victim. I'm not going to focus on the other 2, but I think it's worth looking into this model, especially in a work environment. I see this so often that we all have the ability and probably have all played every one of these roles. But the victim role that we play, and I see this over and over again, is this belief that I don't have any control over my situation, that what is happening to me is the result of other people doing to me. And when we play the victim role, that gives us an excuse not to change, right? It's somebody else's fault. And what's interesting about this is there are some environments or individuals that actually prefer to play the victim role because that's what they have known. That's how they have gotten where they are. And that if that's taken away from them, it's almost like a part of their identity is gone. Like, if I'm not the victim anymore, that means I've actually got to do something about this, right? We all have that ability to play the victim, to play the persecutor, to play the rescuer. But for this, I want to talk just about the victim role. That when we put ourselves in this situation, to feel is like everyone's against me. I don't have any control over this. I don't have enough hours to do the things I want to do. You're playing the victim role. And I'm going to challenge you to maybe go back and look at some of those other resources around growth mindset, things like that, because we don't have to be the victim. I don't care what your situation is in a work environment, that we all have the ability to leave where we're working. Certainly, we see it more right now, this great resignation that we hear about, where people are physically leaving. We all have that ability. Even when people say, "Oh, I have to do this job," you don't have to. You choose to because maybe you have other things that you've chosen to take on as financial liabilities that require you to, but that's a choice. And I think I don't say that in a way to be callous or uncaring. I say it in a way just to make you think about, you do have control over this, because I think when you look at it that way, it helps you to deal with the environment you're in, to know that if you did want to leave, you could. Other things are going to have to change, but you do. I was in one of those situations, so I speak personally on this, is that I had a position that financially it was great. I was very comfortable where I was. And I chose the situation that I was in to stay there until finally I was like, this isn't worth it anymore. I don't want to do this. This isn't my passion or my vision of where I want to go. I had a choice and I left. I acted on that. We all have that ability to do that. So that's, I'm going to leave it at that. Back to this idea of resilience, right? How do we build this? I want to have you think of a couple different objects that I will often use in work that I do with youth when I'm doing youth leadership programs, but also with adults too. And the first one is around a GPS. And if we think about a GPS, right, that's in our car, if we were to plug in a destination and we're going down the road and we miss that exit we're supposed to get off of, the GPS is simply going to say recalculating, and it's going to tell us the next exit to get off. Now, if I missed that exit too, the GPS simply again will say recalculating. The only thing that's going to change is the route will look a little different, and also the time that it's going to take me to get there is probably going to be extended a little bit before I get there. But at no point does the GPS in my car say, Patrick, pull over. You can't get there. You're not going to make it. You're not qualified to drive. You can't make it to this destination. Park the car and go home. It won't do that. Yet, how many times do we do that to ourselves? We make a mistake. We go down the wrong road. We make a poor decision, and we tell ourselves, I can't get there now. It's too late. I've made too many bad decisions. I can't get to where I'm going. When in fact we can, right? And this taps into, again, that the work on grit and growth mindset, and I think anti-fragile, as well as saying we do have the ability to still get where we're wanting to go. It's going to take us a little longer. The route's going to look a little different, but we can get there. And I think we need to really tap into that we have inside of ourselves, that we are a GPS. We have one in us if we choose to activate it and leave it operational. The other part of this is I will often talk about antique furniture and the value that has, because once we get back on track or continue, we might be regretting, decisions we've made or embarrassed about them, whatever that might be. And that can prevent us, I think, from fully being in the moment of where we are. And when you think about antique furniture, I was watching Antiques Roadshow many years ago, and they had somebody on there, a couple, that had a piece of antique furniture that they had fully refinished. It had been in their family for generations, and they decided that they were going to have this thing refinished. And the appraiser said, in its current condition, it's worth about $5,000. Yet had they not refinished this piece, it would have been worth several $1,000s more. And I think to our own existence, those things that are probably the mistakes we made, the nicks, the dings, the wrong turns, that's really where our value comes from. It's not in the wins, it's often in the losses that we have in the struggles that creates our real value. And when we recognize that this struggle that I'm going through right now is going to make me stronger if I choose to tap into it that way, that plays on that anti-fragile piece, that we can do that. I mean, I think that's so important for us to realize. Now, the other thing that two words that I often hear, one is around hope, and the other is around faith. And when we're dealing with struggle and challenge, and the other day I was with a group and they were like, well, we hope it gets better here. And I said, try not to use that word hope. And I meant that in a way of saying that to me, hope is like a beggar in that I don't have control over this. I hope things get better, but I don't have any control. To me, faith is about a confidence, a belief that things are going to get better. And I'm going to find a way to make that happen. I believe that things will get better here. Hope is, to me, out of our control. Now, if you're in such a place where hope is where you have to start from, then by all means do it. But I'm gonna challenge you to say, try and get from hope to faith as fast as you can. Because to me, when you're in a place of faith, you're more resourceful. You're less of a belief that things are going to happen to you and around you that you hope work in your direction, as opposed to faith is about this is going to work out and I will drive this. Or maybe there are other powers involved that will help me to drive this, and I believe in those. Now, the last part of this that I want to talk about in terms of resilience, right? Building resilience is a model that I talk about in the book, The Leadership Bridge. It's a free download that I have on my website, and it's based on 5 activities. And it's based on a journal that I had created called the Power Journal. And this journal is based on a lot of research around 5 different activities that create well-being and happiness in us. And I think that's really important for us to be able to find ways, especially if I'm a leader, then if I don't build that bridge within myself first, it's very difficult for me to effectively build that bridge with other people around me. So in this Power Journal, the first thing that we do is praise. And that's about finding a minimum of 3 things every day. In the morning when you wake up, challenge yourself to write down 3 things you're grateful for today. That's it. What are 3 things that I'm grateful for right now? The next thing that you do in this Power Journal is the O in this journal is around others. And it's trying to find opportunities where you can do things for other people, right? It's not about you, it's about others. And when we give ourselves, when we share with others, when we find ways to impact other people around us, it impacts our own well-being, right? As altruistic as we might be when we do that, there is a benefit that we gain from this as well. The next is around writing. And I often recommend or would suggest do it at the end of the day. And the writing part of this is we write 1 or 2 sentences about what went well during the day. What went well during the day? And if you think about that, right? If the first thing that we do in the morning is gratitude, and the last thing we do at the end of the day is we write down what went well, we've bookended our day in positive places. And I think the writing part is probably more challenging at the end of the day, because how many times do we maybe think about, I've still got to do this tomorrow when the day greets me again, or you're thinking about an argument you got in during the day today before you go to bed. That if we can find a way, force ourselves, there's always something that went well during that day, and to force ourselves to find out and write down what was it, what went well during that day. The E in the Power Journal is around exercise. This doesn't mean running marathons or anything like that. Certainly, if you want to do that, great. But in a lot of the research that's been done, it could be as little as 10 minutes a day that we need to do. That creates this cascade in us around norepinephrine and serotonin and dopamine, all of these things that we need for well-being, that when we exercise, we activate these things, how important that is. Now, the last part that we want to talk about is relaxation. And this could be just focusing on breath. a short ability to focus on our breathing. And that was one of the activities that was done in work that was done by Sean Aker, what was called the 21-Day Happiness Challenge, right? There was an article that I just printed the other day. It's called "A Brief Daily Meditation Enhances Attention, Memory, Mood, and Emotional Regulation in Non-Experienced Meditators." And I think that's so important, right? So here's a piece of research. Again, all of the things that I've talked about have research that backs up all of them, is that you don't have to be a professional, person in mindfulness or, trained in yoga to be able to do this. There are simple techniques. There are, numerous apps that you can use that can help you to figure out how can you find just a minimum of 2 minutes a day that you focus on just your breathing or quiet time, how important that is. And there's so much research out there right now in regards to mindfulness and the impact that that has on physical, emotional, spiritual, all of our different sort of components of health. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, when we talk about these things, right, whether it's building resilience or recognizing when we're playing the victim role, I think that's so important to helping us to build resilience. So I hope you can take something away from this. Find one thing that you can use and activate in your day today. What is it? Because I guarantee you that if you just take consistent steps to do this, you'll build your own resistance, and also you'll